She is the most painted woman in the history of the world. More statues, more cathedrals, more prayers have been aimed at her than at almost any human being who ever lived. And the book at the center of it all never tells you how she died. Think about how strange that is. This is a book that records genealogies going back 40 generations. It tells you how Abraham died, and Moses and David and almost every apostle. It lingers over deathbeds and last words and burials. But the mother of the man at the center of the entire story, she appears at his cross. She shows up one final time in a locked upstairs room in Jerusalem. And then the most documented religion on earth goes completely, utterly silent. No death scene, no funeral, no grave named in Scripture. She simply walks off the page and is never mentioned by name again. And here is where it stops being a gap and starts being a mystery. Because two different cities, hundreds of miles apart, both insist they hold the place where she spent her final days. One of them will show you a tomb, and that tomb is empty. There are no bones of the Virgin Mary anywhere on earth, in an age when the Church treasured the bones of everyone. For most of 2,000 years, the oldest branches of the faith have not even used the word died about her. They use a different word. They say she fell asleep. So this video is going to do something simple and something almost nobody does. We are going to take the question the Bible refuses to answer directly: how did the Virgin Mary die? And we are going to walk every real clue the texts and the oldest traditions actually left behind. 10 of them. 10 hidden secrets, each one stranger than the last, building toward the one at the end that finally explains the silence. And I promise you, by the time we reach the 10th, you will never read the Christmas story the same way again. Let's get into it. Before we can ask how she died, we have to deal with the fact that most of us do not even know what she was actually called, because nobody in her lifetime ever called her Mary. That name did not exist yet. Her mother called her Mariam. In Hebrew, Miriam. It is one of the oldest and most loaded names in the entire Bible, and the moment you know what it carries, the whole picture of this quiet village girl shifts. Start with what it sounds like it means, because scholars have argued about this for centuries, and the argument itself is the point. One old reading ties Miriam to the Hebrew root for bitter, the same root behind Mara, the bitter water in the desert. Another ties it to a word for rebellion. Others reach back further, into Egyptian, where a similar sound means beloved. So depending on which trail you follow, the mother of Jesus carries a name that means bitterness or defiance, or the beloved one. And honestly, hold all three in your hand at once, because by the end of her story, every single one of them will have come true. But the name is not just a puzzle of meaning, it is a deliberate echo. Because there is one other famous Miriam in the Hebrew Bible, and she is not a minor character. She is the sister of Moses, the woman who stood watch over a baby floating in a basket on the Nile, who saved the deliverer of Israel when he was helpless. The prophetess who took up a tambourine on the far shore of the Red Sea and led an entire nation in the first song of freedom in Scripture. So when a Jewish family in the 1st century named a daughter Miriam, they were not picking a name off a shelf. It was one of the most common girls' names of the era, precisely because it rang with that memory. It said, "May this girl be like the woman who guarded the deliverer and sang the nation into freedom." And of all the girls in Galilee carrying that name, one of them would end up guarding a different deliverer and standing at the edge of a different kind of deliverance entirely. Now, here is how it became Mary. The Hebrew Miriam passed into Aramaic, the everyday language she actually spoke, as Mariam. When the Gospels were written in Greek, the writers rendered it as Maria, or sometimes kept it closer to the original as Mariam. Latin smoothed Maria further, and centuries of English finally filed it down to the soft, familiar Mary we say, without thinking. 4 languages stand between the name on the greeting card and the name her mother actually called into the dusk. Every step made her a little gentler, a little more distant, a little less like a real teenage girl in an occupied backwater of the Roman Empire. And that is the first secret, the one that unlocks all the others. The woman we picture in soft blue robes, serene and untouchable, was a girl named after a rebel and a prophetess, in a language most of her worshippers have never heard spoken. If you want to find out how she really died, you have to first let her be who she actually was. Not a statue, a person. A young woman with a fierce name, living under empire, about to be handed a life that no one, then or now, has ever fully explained. Because the truly strange thing is not how loud her name became across the centuries. It is how quiet the actual record of her is. For the most celebrated woman in history, the Bible barely lets her speak at all. And her last recorded words are not the ones you would expect. Here is something that should genuinely unsettle you the next time you see a 100-foot statue of her. Count every word the Virgin Mary actually says in the entire New Testament, and you can read all of it out loud in about 4 minutes. That is it. For the woman 2 billion people revere, the texts hand her only a handful of speaking moments across 4 Gospels. She asks the angel a single, sharp, practical question: how can this be? She sings one soaring song, the one the church later called the Magnificat, where that fierce Miriam energy comes roaring out, and she talks about God pulling down rulers from their thrones and sending the rich away empty. She speaks a few worried lines when she and Joseph lose their 12-year-old boy for 3 days and find him in the temple. And then there is Cana. The wedding at Cana in the Gospel of John is where Jesus turns water into wine, his first miracle. And it is there, in that scene, that Mary says the last words the Bible ever records from her mouth. The wine has run out. She notices, the way mothers notice. She tells her son. He hesitates, and she turns to the servants and says 5 words that the text never follows with another line from her, ever again. Do whatever he tells you. That is the last thing she is ever quoted as saying. Sit with how perfect and how strange that is. The final recorded words of the mother of Jesus are not about herself. They are not a prayer or a prophecy or a goodbye. They are an instruction to point away from her, toward him. Do whatever he tells you. And then, for the rest of the New Testament, she does exactly that. She goes quiet. She steps back into the crowd. She lets the story become his. Now, I want to be careful and honest here, because this is a channel that tries never to overclaim, and this matters. Her silence in the text does not mean she was absent, or unimportant, or ignored by the people who knew her. The Gospels are not biographies of Mary. They are accounts of Jesus, written by people focused entirely on him. So the quiet is partly just the nature of the documents. But even allowing for that, the contrast is staggering. This is the woman present at the beginning of the story, and, as we are about to see, present at its most agonizing moment, and its next great turning point too. She is in the room for the biggest events in the book, and the book lets her say almost nothing. And the silence goes deeper than her voice, because the Bible does not just give us little of what she said, it gives us almost nothing of where she came from. Open the New Testament and try to find her parents. You cannot. It never names her mother. It never names her father. It tells you nothing about her own birth, nothing about her childhood, nothing about how a girl in a nowhere town in Galilee ended up being the one the whole story turns on. On the page, she simply appears, already a young woman, the moment the angel arrives. The most important mother in history has no recorded mother of her own. So where did all the rest of it come from? Because you do have a picture of her early life, whether you realize it or not. Maybe you know the names Joachim and Anne, the traditional parents of Mary. Maybe you have seen the paintings of her as a little girl being presented at the temple. Maybe your church keeps a feast day for her birth, or for her mother, Saint Anne. None of that, not one piece of it, is in the Bible. All of it traces back to a single book, written more than 100 years after she lived, that the church studied carefully and then deliberately kept out of Scripture. It is called the Protoevangelium of James. It appeared around the middle of the 2nd century, long after the eyewitnesses were gone, and it set out to tell the story the Gospels left blank, the story of Mary's own beginning. It gave her parents their names, Joachim and Anne. It made them an elderly, childless couple who had prayed for a child for years. A deliberate echo of the barren mothers of the Hebrew Bible, women like Sarah and Hannah, whose long-awaited children changed everything. It described Mary's miraculous birth, her dedication to the temple as a small girl, her upbringing set apart. It is a tender, beautiful story, and the church, weighing it, decided it was not Scripture and never let it into the Bible. But watch what happened next, because this is the pattern that is going to explain the ending. The church kept it out of the Bible, and yet it could not quite let it go. When the record went silent about Mary, the early community could not bear the blank space, so a tradition rushed in to fill it. And that filling, though it never became Scripture, became almost everything we now picture. The parents, the temple steps, the names carved over church doors, the details in 1,000 paintings. Hold that mechanism in your mind, because we are going to watch it happen a second time at the other end of her life. The same kind of source, early and beloved and sitting just outside the Bible, that rushed in to give her a beginning, is the only thing that will ever try to give her an ending, which sets up the real problem this whole video is circling. If the texts give us so little of her voice while she is alive, and nothing at all of where she came from, what chance do we have of hearing anything about how she died? A woman who speaks 4 minutes of dialogue across her entire recorded life, and whose own parents the Bible never names, is not likely to get a detailed death scene. And she does not get one. But before the silence swallows her completely, the New Testament puts her in 3 more places. 3 appearances, each one loaded, each one a clue. And the first of those 3 is the hardest to watch, because it happens at the foot of a cross. But before we go there, hold on to one number, because it is going to matter at the very end. 4 minutes of words. Remember that when we reach the 10th secret, and you will see why the silence around her death might not be an accident at all. Follow her through the New Testament, and something eerie starts to emerge. Mary is not scattered randomly through the story. She appears at the exact hinges, the moments the entire history turns on. And once you see the pattern, her sudden disappearance becomes almost impossible to explain. She is there at the beginning, obviously. The birth, the stable, the manger, the whole scene the world rebuilds every December. She is the doorway the central figure of the story enters the world through. That one everybody remembers. But then jump to the end of his life, to the single worst day, and look who the Gospel of John places at the foot of the cross. Most of his followers have run. The men who swore they would die for him are hiding behind locked doors across the city. And standing there in the open, close enough to hear him breathe, close enough to watch it happen, is his mother. She was there for the first breath. She is there for the last. A mother, watching her child be executed, unable to stop a second of it. There is no more devastating image of her anywhere, and the text gives it to us in a single restrained sentence. Now hold that, because we will come back to what he says to her from the cross. It is its own secret, and it cracks this entire mystery open. But keep walking the pattern first, because there is a third hinge, and it is the one that turns the disappearance into a genuine puzzle. After the crucifixion, after the resurrection accounts, after the risen figure has gone, the book of Acts opens with the birth of something new. The followers of Jesus are gathered in an upstairs room in Jerusalem, waiting, praying, about to be transformed at Pentecost into the movement that becomes the church. It is the founding moment of the whole institution, and Acts, listing who is in that room, names the 11 remaining apostles, and then adds a specific line. They were all joining together in prayer, along with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus. Look at what just happened across her life. She is present at the birth of Jesus. She is present at the death of Jesus. And she is present at the birth of the church. 3 hinges, the 3 moments the entire story pivots on. She is in the room for all of them. No other single human being in the New Testament can say that. Not Peter, not John, not Paul, who was not even there for 2 of them. She is the one continuous human thread running from the manger to the cross to the founding of the faith. And then, that single line in Acts is the last time the New Testament ever mentions her. She is named in that prayer room, and after that, nothing. No further scene, no aging, no death, no burial. The most important woman in the story, the one human thread tying the whole thing together, is standing right there at the founding of the church, and then she simply steps out of the record and is gone. The book does not tell you what happened next. It does not tell you where she went, how long she lived, or how she died. It just closes the door on her, mid-prayer, and walks away. So that is the shape of the mystery laid bare. Not a woman the story forgot. A woman the story clearly could not forget, placed at every crucial moment and then dropped without explanation at the exact point you would most expect an ending. Somebody in that early community knew what happened to her. She did not vanish into thin air, but the record we were handed goes dark. And to find the first real clue about where she went, we have to go back to that cross and listen to what her dying son arranged for her in the last minutes he had. Go back to that hill and to the most human moment in the whole crucifixion, because in the middle of his own execution, with almost nothing left in him, the Gospel of John says Jesus did something that has everything to do with the mystery of how his mother's story ends. He arranged for her care. John writes that Jesus saw his mother standing there, and beside her the disciple whom he loved, traditionally understood to be John himself. And with what breath he had, he spoke to both of them. To his mother he said, "Woman, here is your son." And to the disciple he said, "Here is your mother." It is a formal handover. A dying man in public, in agony, placing his mother into the keeping of the one follower who did not run. And then John adds one small sentence that turns out to be the first real thread we can pull on. He writes, "From that hour, the disciple took her into his own home." From that hour, she goes home with John. Whatever happens to the mother of Jesus after the cross, the earliest tradition says it happens under the care of this one man. Where he goes, she goes. His story becomes the map to hers. So the obvious question, the one that starts to crack the geography of this mystery wide open, is simple. Where did John go? And here the record does give us something, not in the Gospels, but in the solid early history of the church that follows. Because the Apostle John, by strong and ancient tradition, did not stay in Jerusalem. He traveled north and west across the sea, to one of the great cities of the Roman world, a wealthy, teeming port on the coast of what is now Turkey, famous across the empire for a temple to the goddess Artemis so vast it was counted one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The city was called Ephesus. The early church remembered John as the great figure of Ephesus. He was said to have led the churches of that whole region, to have written from there or near there, to have grown old there, and finally to have died and been buried there. the only apostle by widespread tradition to die of old age rather than by execution. Ephesus is John's city, and if the man Jesus assigned to care for his mother spent his later life in Ephesus, then the trail of the mother, according to a tradition the city itself has held for many centuries, leads to the same place. She went where her guardian went. Some of the oldest voices in the church say Mary lived out her final years not in Jerusalem at all, but on a quiet hillside above Ephesus, in the care of the disciple her son gave her from the cross. Now, I have to be straight with you, because this is exactly the kind of claim that gets flattened online into false certainty. The New Testament itself does not say Mary went to Ephesus. It says John took her into his home, and it stops there. The Ephesus connection is tradition, some of it early and serious, built by connecting John's well-attested life in that city to the mother he was given. It is a reasonable inference, held for a very long time by a lot of careful people, but it is an inference, not a verse. I am going to keep drawing that line all the way through this video between what the text actually says and what the tradition built on top of it, because the honest version of this mystery is far more interesting than the flattened one. But this is the moment the quiet mystery suddenly gets loud, because Ephesus is not the only city that claims her. Jerusalem never let go of her either, and to this day, hundreds of miles apart, two different holy sites will each walk you to the very spot where they say the Virgin Mary spent her last days on earth. They cannot both be right, and one of them was found in a way that should not have been possible at all. Start with Ephesus, because the story of how her house there was found is one of the strangest true episodes in the history of archaeology. And I do mean true. This part is documented and verifiable, whatever you make of what sits underneath it. For most of church history, nobody knew of any specific building near Ephesus tied to Mary. There was a general tradition that she had lived in the region, but no address, no ruins, no site. Then, in the early 19th century, hundreds of miles away in Germany, a bedridden nun named Anne Catherine Emmerich began to describe visions. She had never traveled. She never went to Turkey, never saw Ephesus, never left her own region in any meaningful way. But in her visions she described in precise physical detail a small stone house on a hill near Ephesus, where she said the Virgin Mary had lived out her final years. She described the shape of the rooms, the lay of the land, the distance from the sea, the surrounding features. Those descriptions were written down and published after her death. And decades later, in the late 19th century, a group of priests, half skeptical, decided to test the visions of a dead nun by actually going to the hills above Ephesus with her descriptions in hand. Using her account like a map, they searched the hillside, and they found it. A ruined stone building on a hill near the sea, matching the description, on a spot local Orthodox Christians had quietly venerated for generations as the House of Mary. They called it in Turkish, Meryem Ana, the House of Mother Mary. That house still stands today, restored, and it is one of the most visited pilgrimage sites in the region. Multiple popes have traveled there and prayed. It is treated with enormous seriousness by millions of people. And I want to be very clear about what that does and does not prove, because this is a channel that does not do magic tricks with evidence. It does not prove Mary lived there. It does not prove the visions were supernatural. There are natural explanations. The local veneration that predated the search, the general tradition, the way descriptions can be matched loosely to real terrain. But it is a genuinely remarkable documented fact that a bedridden woman who never traveled produced a description detailed enough to lead searchers to a real, previously unidentified site that others already treated as sacred. Make of it what you will. The Church itself has never made belief in the visions compulsory. But the house is there. You can walk into it. So that is Ephesus. a house found by a dream, where one ancient tradition says Mary's life on earth quietly ended. But now turn around, look hundreds of miles south, and you run straight into the rival claim, because Jerusalem says she never left. In the Kidron Valley, just outside the Old City, at the foot of the Mount of Olives, near the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus prayed the night he was arrested, there is a church. You go down a wide, worn flight of stone stairs, deep underground, into candle-lit darkness. And at the bottom, cut into the rock, there is a small chamber that has been venerated for many centuries as the tomb of the Virgin Mary. This is the other answer. The Jerusalem tradition holds that Mary lived and died in that city, in the place where the church was born, close to the sites of her son's death and resurrection, and that she was laid to rest right there in the valley below the Mount of Olives. So now you have the collision at the heart of this mystery. Two cities, two traditions, two physical sites you can visit right now, each one telling you, with total conviction, this is where the Mother of God ended her earthly life. Ephesus, following the trail of John. Jerusalem, following the gravity of the city where it all happened. And they flatly contradict each other. She did not die in two places. Somebody's tradition took a wrong turn somewhere in the fog of those first few centuries when nobody was writing it down. But here is the twist that makes the two cities' problem so much stranger than a simple disagreement. Because you would think, with a contradiction like this, that at least one side would be guarding a body, a relic, a bone, something. That is how the ancient church worked. When a saint died, their remains became priceless. And when you go looking for the physical remains of the most important woman in Christian history, you run into the single most astonishing fact in this entire investigation. There aren't any. And that Jerusalem tomb I just walked you into? Open it up and it is empty. To feel how strange this next fact is, you have to understand how obsessed the early and medieval church was with bodies. Holy bodies, the bones of the dead. When a saint or an apostle died, their physical remains did not just get buried and forgotten. They became some of the most valuable objects on earth. Bones were divided up, encased in gold and jewels, fought over, stolen, carried across continents, and enshrined at the heart of the greatest cathedrals ever built. Whole cities rose around a single relic. Peter is under a basilica in Rome. Apostles, martyrs, saints of every century. We have bones, skulls, fingers, fragments scattered across churches all over the world, each one treasured for centuries. The church kept the bodies of its holy dead, the way a nation keeps its crown jewels. So think about who the most venerated human being in all of Christianity is, after Jesus himself. It is not close. It is his mother. More churches are dedicated to her than to any saint. If a single fragment of bone anywhere could be shown to be hers, it would instantly be the most precious relic on the planet, the crown of every treasury, the destination of every pilgrimage. The demand for it would be limitless. And there are none, nowhere, in 2,000 years across a church that saved, catalogued, divided and enshrined the bodies of thousands upon thousands of its holy dead. No one has ever produced the bones of the Virgin Mary. There is no skull, no skeleton, no grave that has yielded remains, no city that claims to hold her body. And it is not for lack of wanting one. It is one of the loudest silences in the history of relics. The one body the church would have treasured above all others is the one body it never had. Now, let me hold the honest line here, because this is where it would be easy to cheat. The absence of relics is not by itself proof of anything miraculous. You can argue it a few ways. Maybe her burial place was genuinely lost in the chaos of the first centuries, the wars, the destruction of Jerusalem, the scattering of the early community, and the bones were simply never recovered. Absence of evidence is not on its own evidence. That is the careful, skeptical reading, and I am not going to pretend it away. But now set that fact next to everything else we have found and feel how it starts to lean in one particular direction. A woman the story places at every hinge, then drops without a death scene. 2 cities claiming her final days, but neither one guarding a body. A tomb in Jerusalem that people venerate, that is real, that you can descend into, and that is empty. And no bones, anywhere, ever, for the one person whose remains the whole church would have wanted most. Any one of those on its own you could explain away. But they all point the same direction. They all circle the same missing center. Something happened at the end of Mary's life that left no body to bury and no bones to keep. And the oldest traditions of the church have a word for what that something was. But before we open that word up, because it is the hinge the whole second half of this video turns on, I need to say one quick thing to you directly. If you would rather understand what these ancient texts and traditions actually say in their own words than keep repeating the flattened version most of us were handed, then subscribe. That is the entire reason this channel exists. Every week I take one story people are sure they already understand, and we go back to the oldest sources, the Greek and the Hebrew and the traditions the picture books skip, to find out what is genuinely there. It honestly helps these deeper readings reach people who have only ever heard the shallow version. All right. So here is where the mystery stops being about geography and starts being about a single word. Because for most of 2,000 years, the oldest branches of Christianity have described the end of Mary's life with a word that deliberately, pointedly refuses to say she died. In the Christian East, in the Greek-speaking world that produced the New Testament itself, the end of Mary's life is not called her death. It is called the Dormition. And behind that Latin-flavored word sits the actual Greek term the tradition uses, koimesis. Koimesis means falling asleep, not dying, sleeping. It comes from the ordinary Greek verb for lying down to sleep. And when the church chose that word for the end of Mary's life, it was making a claim, gently but unmistakably. It was saying that whatever happened to her at the end was not death the way we fear it. It was more like a woman lying down, closing her eyes, and being carried somewhere. And here is the detail that should genuinely stop you, because it is hiding in a word you already know. That same Greek root for sleep, koimen, is where we get a very common English word, cemetery. The word cemetery comes from the Greek koimeterion, which means literally a sleeping place, a dormitory for the dead. Think about what that means. Every time anyone in the Western world says the word cemetery, they are unknowingly repeating an ancient Christian claim that the dead are not gone, only sleeping, waiting to be woken. And the tradition attached that exact word, that exact hope, to Mary in its strongest possible form. She did not die and stay dead in a grave. She fell asleep, koimesis. The feast that celebrates it, kept every year in the middle of August, is called the Dormition, the falling asleep of the Mother of God, and it is one of the great feasts of the Eastern churches, older by far than most of what the West later defined. Now I have to flag, as always, exactly what kind of claim this is. The word koimesis does not, by itself, prove anything happened. Early Christians used sleep language for the death of ordinary believers too. Paul talks about believers who have fallen asleep. So the word carries a general Christian hope about death, not only a special claim about Mary. That is the honest flaw of it. But watch what the tradition does with the word in her case specifically. For ordinary believers, they fall asleep and their bodies remain, waiting. For Mary, the tradition says something happened to the body. The sleeping was not the end of the story, and that is where the word stops being a general comfort and becomes the doorway into the strangest claim of all. because here is what the oldest Dormition traditions actually describe, and it reads less like a funeral and more like a sequel to a resurrection. They do not simply say she died peacefully and was buried, and that was that. They tell a specific, vivid, and deliberately familiar story about what happened around her sleeping. A story with a deathbed, and a gathering, and a burial, and then, 3 days later, an empty tomb. If that timeline sounds familiar, it is supposed to. The whole shape of it is built to rhyme with something you already know by heart. And I want to walk you through that story carefully, because it is where the two empty tomb sites, the missing bones, and the word for sleep all finally connect. It is not in the Bible. I will say that plainly and keep saying it. It comes from a set of ancient texts the Church itself treated as tradition rather than scripture. But those texts are old. They were told and retold across the whole Christian world, and they are the closest thing we have to an answer to the question we started with. This is what the early church believed happened in the room when the mother of Jesus fell asleep. And the first thing that happens is that, from the ends of the earth, the apostles start arriving. By the time of these Dormition accounts, decades have passed since the cross. The apostles are no longer together in one upper room. They have scattered across the known world, carrying the message to different countries, some as far as the edges of the empire and beyond. They are old men now, spread across thousands of miles, most of them never to see each other again in this life. And the oldest traditions say that as Mary's earthly life drew to its close, they came back, not gradually, not by ordinary travel. The accounts describe the apostles being brought suddenly and miraculously from wherever they were preaching, carried across the world to be at her side one last time. One moment preaching in a distant land, the next standing in that small room. Whatever you make of the miracle, look at what the story is insisting on. That the woman who had been at every hinge of their story would not fall asleep alone. The men whose movement she had helped birth were gathered around her, the way a family gathers. The accounts describe her final moments as calm, unafraid, almost radiant. She speaks to them, comforts them, and then simply falls asleep. The koimesis, her spirit received, the tradition says, directly by her Son. And then the apostles do for her what was done for him. They take her body, wrap it, and lay it in a tomb, a rock-cut tomb, in a garden, in the Kidron Valley below the Mount of Olives, the very place Jerusalem still venerates today. They seal it, and they keep watch. And this is where the story does the thing it has been building toward the entire time, because there was one apostle who did not make it in time. One who arrived late, after the burial, after the tomb was already sealed. And the tradition names him, and the moment you hear the name you will understand why the storytellers could not resist it. It was Thomas. Thomas, the same apostle who, in the Gospels, arrived too late to see the risen Jesus with the others, and refused to believe until he could see and touch for himself. Doubting Thomas, history calls him. And in the Dormition tradition, Thomas is late again. He arrives after Mary has been buried, grieving that he never got to say goodbye, and he begs to see her tomb one more time. So they take him down to the sealed grave, and they roll the stone back, and the tomb is empty. The body is gone. In some tellings, all that remains is the burial shroud, and the tomb is filled with the scent of flowers, lilies and roses blooming where she had lain. The tradition says that Mary, like her Son, did not stay in the grave, that the falling asleep was not an ending, but a passage, and that her body was taken up, raised and carried into heaven, rather than left to decay in the earth. And it was Thomas, the one who came late, the one who always needed to see for himself, who became the witness to the empty tomb. The doubter, once again, is the one who finds the grave undone. Now watch how much this single story quietly explains. The empty tomb in Jerusalem that you can descend into today? This is the tomb it is, venerated as her burial place precisely because the tradition says her body did not remain in it. The complete absence of bones anywhere in the world explained if there was never a body left to enshrine. The word koimesis, falling asleep instead of dying. Exactly the right word for a passage that ends not in a grave, but in being carried home. Every loose thread we have pulled on, the silence, the empty sights, the missing relics, the strange soft word for her death, all of them tie together in this one ancient story about a gathering, a sleep, and a tomb found open on the third day. But a story told in ancient tradition is one thing. What is genuinely remarkable is that this belief did not stay a quiet legend whispered in the East. It grew and hardened and climbed over 19 centuries until it became one of the most solemn official declarations the largest church on earth has ever made. And the date it became official is astonishingly, almost unbelievably recent. For most of Christian history, the belief that Mary was taken bodily into heaven lived as tradition, deeply held, widely believed, celebrated every August, painted into 1,000 church ceilings, but never formally defined as a required doctrine of faith. It was carried, not decreed. And then, in the middle of the 20th century, that changed in one of the most deliberate acts the Catholic Church has ever performed. In the year 1950, after consulting bishops across the entire world, Pope Pius XII issued a solemn definition, speaking in the most binding way the office claims to be able to speak on a matter of faith. He declared it a dogma, a truth to be held by all the faithful, that Mary, at the end of her earthly life, was taken up, body and soul, into heavenly glory. This is what the Church calls the Assumption, and with that declaration, a belief that had lived for 19 centuries as story and tradition became, for over 1 billion people, official and defined. Sit with how recent that is. 1950. There are people alive today, plenty of them, who were already born when the Church made its most solemn possible statement about how the life of the Virgin Mary ended. The belief is ancient. The official definition is younger than the television. It is one of the newest formally defined doctrines in the whole of Christianity, attached to one of the oldest questions. But now I have to show you the single most careful, most fascinating detail in the entire official declaration, because it goes right back to the question this whole video is built on. When the Church defined the Assumption, it had to choose its words with extraordinary precision. And on one specific point, it deliberately, knowingly, left the door open. The definition says that Mary, having completed the course of her earthly life, was assumed body and soul into glory. Read that phrase again, having completed the course of her earthly life. It does not say having died. It does not say without dying. It says having completed the course of her earthly life, and then it stops. That wording was chosen on purpose. Because even in 1950, even at the highest level of the Church, in the most solemn definition it could make, there was no agreement and no claim to know whether Mary actually died before she was assumed or whether she was taken up without dying at all. That question, the exact question in the title of this video, how did the Virgin Mary die, was left formally, officially, deliberately open. The Church defined that she was taken into glory. It pointedly refused to define whether death came first. And the two great branches of the ancient Church lean in two different directions on exactly this. The Eastern tradition, the older instinct, generally holds that, yes, she truly died, a real human death, the koimesis, and then 3 days later, her body was raised and taken up, following the pattern of her Son as closely as a human being possibly could. She died and was raised. The Western definition, more cautious, refuses to insist on the death at all, leaving room for the possibility that she was taken up while still living, passing into glory without ever tasting death, as a unique grace. So here we are, at the most unexpected place this could possibly land. We asked how the Virgin Mary died. We have walked through her fierce forgotten name, her near-total silence, her presence at every hinge, her handover to John, two rival cities, an empty tomb, a complete absence of bones, an ancient word that means sleeping, a gathering of apostles, a doubter at an open grave, and finally the largest church on earth making its most solemn declaration in 1950. And at the end of all of it, the honest, documented official answer to how she died is this: nobody will say, not the Bible, not even the church at its most authoritative. The question is left standing wide open on purpose. And that refusal, that deliberate 2,000-year silence, right at the moment you most expect an answer, is not a failure of the record. In the 10th and final secret, I am going to show you why it might be the most fitting ending her story could possibly have, and why the woman who walked off the page in a locked room in Jerusalem shows up one last time in the very last book of the Bible, in a place absolutely nobody expects. So let me answer the question honestly, one more time, and then show you the thing that makes the silence beautiful instead of frustrating. How did the Virgin Mary die? We do not know. The Bible does not record it. The two cities that claim her contradict each other. The church that reveres her most left the death itself deliberately undefined. On the plain level of history, the mother of Jesus walked off the page in a locked room in Jerusalem, and the door closed behind her, and that is the last certain thing anyone can say. And I know that is not the tidy answer the title seemed to promise you. You came here for a deathbed, a date, a place. So did I. But the honest reader has to sit in the same fog the church has sat in for 2,000 years, and it is only from inside that fog that you can see the thing the tidy answer would have hidden completely. But watch what the story does with that silence, because it is not empty. Think back to the shape of her whole life as the texts give it. Her last recorded words were, "Do whatever he tells you," an instruction to look away from herself and toward her son. Her entire recorded life is a slow, deliberate stepping back, out of the spotlight, into the crowd, letting the story become his. She spends the New Testament getting quieter and quieter, smaller and smaller in the frame, until she disappears entirely. 4 minutes of recorded words across an entire lifetime, and then a silence so complete it swallowed even her death. And that is the clue we almost walked right past. An ending we cannot find is the perfect ending for a woman whose whole life was about pointing away from herself. The silence around her death is not the story failing to describe her. It is the final act of the exact humility the story describes. She exits the way she lived, quietly, without a monument, pointing past herself. And yet the book does not quite let her disappear for good, because there is one more appearance, and almost nobody connects it to her, and it is the most spectacular of all. Turn to the very last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, into its wild visions of the end. And there in the 12th chapter, John describes a great sign appearing in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she is about to give birth to a son who will rule the nations, while a great dragon waits in front of her to devour the child the moment he is born. Now, I have to be careful here, in exactly the way I have been all along, because this image has been read more than one way for a very long time, and honesty demands I tell you that. Many readers understand the woman clothed with the sun to represent the people of God, Israel, or the church itself, the community that brings forth the Messiah into the world. That is a serious and ancient reading. and I am not going to pretend it away. But from very early on, Christians also saw in her a portrait of Mary, the woman who literally gave birth to the Son who would rule the nations, the mother the dragon could not devour, lifted up and crowned in the sky at the end of all things. And whichever reading you hold, or if you hold both at once, look at what the book has done. The woman who quietly vanished from a locked room in Jerusalem, whose grave no one can find and whose bones no one has ever held, reappears at the very end of the story, not in a tomb, but in the heavens, clothed in the sun, crowned with stars, more alive than ever. And that is the shape of the whole thing, from the first secret to the last. A girl with a rebel's name in a nowhere town, a woman who spoke 4 minutes of words and then went silent, present at the birth, the death, and the founding of a faith, and then gone from the page without a trace, claimed by 2 cities, buried in a tomb that is empty, leaving behind not a single bone, falling asleep in the tradition rather than dying, gathered around by apostles, carried from the ends of the earth, and finally, whether by a death and a raising, or a passage without death at all, taken out of reach of every grave, until the only place the book can show her to you again is the sky. The question was how she died, and the story's answer across 2,000 years is to lift her up out of the reach of the question entirely. Which brings us all the way back around to where we began. We started with something that should have been simple and turned out to be a locked door. The most painted woman in history, and a book that records the deaths of almost everyone around her, will not tell you how she died. And the easy thing to do with a gap like that is to fill it with certainty, to pick a city, pick a date, pick a version, and pretend the fog was never there. But we did the harder, better thing. We walked every real clue the texts and the oldest traditions actually left, and we let the mystery stay a mystery where the evidence runs out. A forgotten, fierce name, 4 minutes of recorded words, a presence at every hinge of the story, then a vanishing, a handover from the cross to John, and a trail that leads toward Ephesus. 2 cities, one of them pointing to an empty tomb, no bones anywhere on earth. A word that means falling asleep instead of dying. An ancient story of a gathering and an open grave. A dogma defined within living memory that still refuses to say whether death came first. And a woman crowned with stars at the end of the book. That is the whole reason this channel exists. To open the book back up and read what is actually on the page, and to be honest about where the page goes quiet, even when the quiet is the most interesting part of all. So here is the thought worth carrying with you. Maybe the reason we cannot find her ending is that she never really wanted one. A woman whose last words were, "Do whatever he tells you," was never going to leave behind a monument with her own name on it. She spent her life pointing past herself, and in the end, even her death does the same thing. It points past itself, toward her Son, toward an empty tomb, toward the sky. She got the quietest, most fitting exit in the entire Bible, and 2 billion people have been trying to fill the silence ever since. And that is why I told you, right at the start, that you would never see the Christmas story the same way again. Look at the manger now. That young mother bent over the feeding trough is not the soft opening image on a greeting card. She is a girl named after a rebel and a prophetess, holding a son she will follow all the way to a cross, into a locked upper room, and then straight off the edge of the record, until the only frame large enough to hold her is the night sky itself. The Nativity was never where her story started being extraordinary. It is just where most of us stopped paying attention. If this made you see even one familiar story with new eyes, subscribe, because next we are staying right here with her and asking the question that comes just before this one. Not how the story ends, but how it starts. What the oldest texts really say about the virgin birth, and the single Hebrew word in the prophecy that scholars have been fighting over for 2,000 years. And the video on screen right now pulls another hidden thread out of these same pages. Go ahead and click it. I think you will want to see where this one leads.